I'm Joe Unger, and this is a Pinball Rules Podcast, where we find out what it means to design for humans. There are times when designing seems to boil down to rules. A set of X's, and if done right, they end up in Y. But do we have that right? What if Y is our start, and X's are just how we get there? Is it just that the more often we see, hear, or experience X, the better we think Y will be? Rapper and playwright Baba Brinkman is a master at communicating this flow, the role between X's and Y's, the questions and answers, hip-hop and science. In this show, Baba and I talk about how he designs these rhymes, and how in his latest work, The Rap Guide to Religion, he takes the themes of cultural evolution and hard science and puts them into the rhythm of approachability, discoverability, and mastery that exemplify the pinball rules. In the second half of our show, we'll repeat this refrain with our creative commentator Trisha Williams and science commentator Sergei Gepshtein. So what comes first for you? Form or function? Style or content? The rhythm or the rhyme?
Are you really thinking that you're going to take it away from your bikes, please? Just an illusion. The feeling is incredible, no one can tell me it's amazing. Are you really thinking that you're going to take it away from your bikes, please? Religions. Some people think they're viruses.
Rappers in general seem to be intimately tied to where they're from. NWA brings up Los Angeles a lot, Eminem in Detroit. Do you think that where you're from affects your work?
Yeah, I try to bring in my background and my upbringing and my experiences as much as possible. And that's just, I see that as a hip hop standard that's part of the genre, is talk about where you're from and how it shaped you. But, you know, that's also like a good general writing technique, write about what you know. Right. So if whatever subject I'm tackling, whether it's, you know, climate change or religion or evolution or whatever, then I situate myself in terms of my subjectivity and my experiences and how they relate to the subject at hand. And I think that creates relatability with audiences and, you know, authenticity in terms of he's speaking on something because he's been there.
What drew you to hip hop?
I guess it was poetry that drew me to hip hop, because I was always a wordsmith and I wrote poems when I was even like 5 or 6 years old. I was writing poems. And I was really gravitated to poetry in school, so English was always my favorite class, and I loved sort of reading and analyzing poems, and I wanted to be a poet for many years, but I didn't really know what kind of poet, and I didn't really see much prospect for poetry to, you know, support somebody or lead to, you know, excitement and adventure, until at one point I sort of had this aha moment when I was like, oh, rap is a kind of poetry. So if I master that form of poetry, then I'll get to accomplish the goal of expressing myself via sort of stylized language. And so I was attracted to the craftsmanship and the lyricism of rap from a very young age. And there was a point at which I decided I wanted to sort of try to master the techniques.
Being a performer in this space, what do you think leads hip hop to have this huge global appeal to people?
I think hip-hop settled on a really simple and potent set of elements. You know, the beat is primal. The part of our brain that appreciates rhythm is ancient, reptilian, and we really have sort of rhythms ingrained in us. And hip-hop has extremely catchy rhythms. They found a way to create poetry or rhythmic lyrical flow over those rhythms that's really impactful. You know, that resonates with the whole oral tradition. You know, there was a time, you go back far enough and subtract enough technologies, and there was a time when oral storytelling was our primary form of entertainment, and that was our leisure time, but also the sort of transmission of culture was through the sort of troubadour tradition and the griot in Africa and you know, Homer and the sort of epic storytelling traditions of every culture's got this, right? And so all this media came in and sort of replaced it for us, and rap found a way to tap back into it.
It's almost like a technology in itself. One guy figured out a way to communicate a little bit better than everybody else, catch people's attention a little bit better than everybody else. Before we had books, we had music and rhyme, right?
Totally. And, you know, I would even put a Darwinian framework on it as well, because rap has always been an inherently and sort of unapologetically competitive art form. I think Praz from the Fugees put it the best when he said there's too many MCs and not enough mics. And that situation creates this competition for space on the mic that really pushes everyone to excel. And the criteria is so simple. You got to move the crowd. and whoever gets the best crowd response is the one that has earned the mic time. And that formula really causes the cream to rise to the top. I always loved rap as an art form because, contrary to sort of abstract jazz or something, only an expert knows the difference between what's good and what's not. It's very inaccessible, and it's the same with lots of art forms that are sort of elite. Like, who could tell the difference between a really amazing abstract painting that deserves to be in the Met and one that's just like somebody ran over it with their car or something,
Right.
Like, the experts police these realms, but hip hop is very populist. It's record sales and crowd response and hyper competitiveness because everybody wants to be an MC, and that causes the people that come through the gauntlet of that competition to really genuinely have skill and not be just products.
How does hip hop start for you? Does it start with the audience or the concept? Is it, it's almost like a chicken and the egg. What's first, the beat or the rhyme?
My first couple of albums, most of the songs I wrote before hearing the beat, and I found a beat that worked, but it's never going to be as good of a match as when you sit down with the beat and you just like let it talk to you and let it stake out an emotional tone and let the idea flow from it. When I've produced albums that are just straight up hip hop albums, right. Apocalyptic Utopian Dreams, and that was an album full of songs where I just heard the beat and sort of let it talk to me. But more recently, because I've been creating rap guides, I'm starting with a whole lot of research. I'm spending months with a stack of books, just working out the ideas and taking notes and reading, websites and science blogs and things until I feel like I know what I want to say about the subject, and then I start listening for beats. But I've usually already got a chapter outline for these rap guides. I'm going to do a song about this, and it's going to be followed by a song about this, and then a song about this. And I've got these folders with, say 100 instrumentals, and they're each a minute and a half long, and they're just like a verse chorus part, just the concept of a song, but not fully fleshed out. And I'm just flipping through them like, no, not that sound, ooh, that's a pretty nice one right there. Okay, that's the vibe that's going to fit. So I kind of build the album like piece by piece like that, concept by concept, and song and like melody by melody.
What's one thing that really seems to separate your work from a lot of hip hop is that depth of research into really academic territory, right? And that it requires such a knowledge base. There's a lot of risk for tripping up and getting it wrong.
That just reflects my personality because I'm a geek. I've always been a reader, and I've always been just interested in, how the world works and trying to communicate it. So, the idea of calling myself peer-reviewed rap, that didn't really hit until a couple of years ago when I did the Rap Guide to Evolution, and that was actually sort of the idea of this professor that I was working with, Mark Palin. He's a bacterial geneticist, and he sort of challenged me to explain Darwin's theory in rap songs. But he also, offered to, well, I was going to say offered, but actually he insisted on having the opportunity to fact check my lyrics because he was going to present me performing the raps for an academic conference with all of his evolutionist peers, and he didn't want me to, kind of embarrass him up there. So he wanted to double check that what I was going to say was going to be scientifically kosher. And then he made a joke to someone that the rap was peer reviewed, and I was like, that's gold. I'm using that.
Increasingly, world building is something that you'll hear come from us. A lot of that is establishing a futurist or an artificial world that is based in hard science and based in hard fact. You can kind of see that effect with Star Trek, for instance, right? And that increasingly artists are trying to communicate ideals of the future. Do you find yourself trying to do that as well? Are these more than just communicating the existing science? Is it about communicating ideals for the future as well?
I see that as a big part of an artist's craft. Whatever their technique is, I could be writing short stories or novels or screenplays, but as it happens at the moment, I'm writing rap albums. On several of my albums, you'll find the same thing, which is I sort of do a recap track at the end, which is like, okay, how have we gotten to the place where we're at? I really like creating a song that paints that picture for people and gives them a sense of, what they can do, whether it's go get more information or So some of the shows have a sort of call to action at the end, but they all have a call to envision the world that you want and use the scientific knowledge that we have to help chart a path that's more realistic towards achieving the goals that we have as a society or as a species.
Kind of Machiavellian, suppressing any act of rebellion. But just because it seems designed doesn't mean the designer has to be brilliant. Cultures produce designs, they test and try different combinations, and promoting fertility might have helped some to avoid foreign domination. Take a look at the sky and gaze at a billion stars.
Is that something you discover as you're creating and you're putting it all together, or is it something that you kind of go in with as a driving force behind an album?
No, definitely you discover it. An album will start with just being really intrigued by a subject and thinking there's something here that's worth exploring and worth sharing. Then as I collect the tidbits and the kernels and the jewels, I always find things where I'm like, oh, I can't believe everyone doesn't know about this. This explains so much. Okay, I'm going to make a song about it. And then, I don't write that, I couldn't write that last track until all the other tracks are finished. It is really like I have to write the last song of the album last, because then I can take the bird's eye view of all the things that I've accumulated at that point in terms of ideas and concepts and discoveries, and then go, well, if all of that is the case, then that means we can and sometimes we should do this. So it's a discovery.
Yeah, it sounds like your experience with narrative design and structure from your literary background is really something that profoundly impacts your process.
I ended up with a graduate degree in literature, and it was, there's a lot of that, analyzing technique and analyzing narrative structure in everything from a poem to a short story to a novel to even I even did a course on screenplays. I've never written a novel and I've never written a screenplay, but I think there are commonalities in the techniques. And it was just my obsession with rap, because I was just such a hip hop head. And I think part of why I ended up in this career was this sort of chip on my shoulder, where I was so impressed with the artistry of rap, and I would go around and try to talk to people about it, and they would go, rap is ignorant, rap is debased, it's nothing but celebrations of violence and misogyny. And I'd be like, no, you're missing the craft that's going into it, and some of the messages are in your face and controversial, but that's the case with lots of literature. And I want to show you what rap is capable of that makes you take a second look at it as an art form in general. And I get that, because I perform at a lot of theaters for just general ticket buying audiences. Like I did a 7-month run off Broadway in New York last winter, which closed in May. And a lot of the people who come are just New Yorkers, of means, who have the money to buy a $45 ticket and just go to something because they're curious. So, I'll get like a 90-year-old man being like, well, I never really thought hip hop was much of an art form, but if this is what hip hop is, I'm going to go give it another try. And that kind of thing is one of my favorite. Besides communicating the ideas in the show, I'm on sort of a mission to show people that hip hop is more than they've given it credit for, if they haven't already given it credit. Obviously, the fans already love it and appreciate the artistry, but there's a real generational thing.
Like you were saying, the difference between the perception of these lyrics that are trite and kind of just party lyrics versus the kind of my experience, and sounds like yours too, of kind of this history of controversy within hip hop, and that controversy even popularizing it. Do you think that hip hop has a more effective tool on that front for communicating those sorts of things?
The first rap record that really hit and most people really heard was Rapper's Delight. And Rapper's Delight is a pretty shallow rap album. There's not much social commentary going on in Rapper's Delight, let's say.
Right.
So if that had come to define the rap genre, which it could have, if history had unfolded differently, then what I would be doing would seem completely alien and beyond the pale. But because it's not actually so strange, because rap is already all about social commentary, and there's some very literate rappers that are doing complex things. I remember when I first heard Mos Def and Talib Kweli, Black Star, and the whole like I can feel the city breathing, and just this whole analysis of city existence but with such a sort of poetic streak through it all, just trying to find the metaphors and sort of images that will capture the experience. And it really, well, and you mentioned obviously De La and Public Enemy with the with speaking truth to power and sort of challenging the status quo and the political streak in it. And, you know, rap has the diversity to branch out to anywhere. There's a couple songs like 6 in the Morning or Dance with the Devil by Immortal Technique, or, you know, Children's Story by Slick Rick that have a narrative thread from beginning to end. So I was like, okay, you can do a 10-minute long rap song that tells a story. And that was what emboldened me to start Canterbury Tales in rap. With each of my Canterbury Tales are sort of 7 to 10 minutes and tell a whole story. And, you know, you got Chemical Calisthenics by Black Alicious, and they've got all science material woven into the song. So, you know, then if you can do that, then let's do one about evolution. So the sort of seeds are already there. I just made it like one step more bookish.
From an outsider's perspective, there seems to be this shift in somehow in the process that we've come to this point where there's even more MCs and more microphones now, right?
That's true, yeah. That formula has shifted a bit, right?
Right.
There's still too many MCs and not enough mics, but there's a lot more mics, and they're all amplified a lot less.
Right. Yeah, right.
That's the democratization process. I mean, when Praz said that is sort of the mid-90s, and all from the mid-90s through the mid-2000s, it was just record labels putting on artists, and A&Rs discovered them. So the Eminem story is classic, where he's sort of underground making mixtapes, and that's a much more of a rare story now. People go viral based on fans just sharing their stuff and blow up and become like YouTube stars first, and then it's so much more grassroots. And yeah, you're right, it does create the space for so many more voices to have their own fan bases and not need to wait for somebody that's a gatekeeper at a record label to give them permission to make a career out of it. You know, I started a label in 2007 just to put my own music out and develop some artists that I was impressed with in Vancouver, and I've been making a living off of rap for almost 12 years now, and I've never had any sort of top-down assistance from any labels or anything. And that's, you know, that definitely as an artist and for the career that I've had, I'm definitely like a product of the internet age, relying on, you know, niche fans all around the world to support and buy the records and point me towards venues where I can do gigs without the traditional music industry infrastructure to support me at all.
Right. It's like off of the Rap Guide to Religion in your new album. The song Spread It talks about how to spread ideas and how ideas move around.
Cultural evolution. Because when your brain picks up information, it's kind of picky. But what makes a piece of information sticky? Sticky, icky, sticky, icky, icky, icky. Repetition helps a little bit, definitely. Plus ideas spread when they're counterintuitive, but not too much.
There is something really sort of humbling and amazing about you create something, you put it out there, and then it's in other people's heads, and it comes back to you at random times when they can recite the lyrics back to you, and you know that's when you feel like you're definitely like making an impact.
If you could have any one line or one track that would really stick with someone, what would that one track be?
I mean, I would probably have to go with Performance Feedback Revision. That's the song that's gotten the most positive feedback in terms of people just writing to me and saying, this is a great idea. People writing to me and saying, do you mind if I use this in my presentation to my board of directors at my company, or, you know, my team building exercise, or, you know, the best one was actually somebody wrote to me and asked how I would feel if they got it tattooed on their neck. And they did it, and they sent me a photo of Performance Feedback Revision tattooed across the back of their neck. And that was a guy that was having problems with alcohol abuse, and he used that as a mantra to take it day by day and do AA and get sober. And then his whole career sort of bounced back, and he said he was thriving and back with his wife and all this stuff because those words resonated with him. So, you know, that's one I'll take credit for as an original coinage. It's basically just a spin on how natural selection works, you know, at the level of development and learning and culture. But I think they're words to live by. My name is Bobby Brinkman. I'm a rap artist and a playwright from Vancouver, Canada, currently living in New York. For me, design is about process of discovery, not a process of creation. And, you know, when I find that rhyme or that concept for a song or that hook, it's almost like it already existed, and it was just a discovery of there it is, and that's the way it's got it. You know, that's the way that that it feels like it needs to exist.
And show them evidence like the bones of Tiktaalik. Yes, this is how I'm just trying to represent it for my fam. I learned about my origins up in the Descent of Man. Cause this is how my show gets written. Plus the revision, kinda like this. Performance, feedback, revision. And anybody here can use this style to do anything, kinda like this. Performance, feedback, revision. But remember, you get the feedback and you make the decision. Like this. Performance, feedback, revision. You wanna know about evolution? That's the definition. Like this. Performance, feedback, revision. One more time. Performance, feedback, revision.
Welcome back to part 3 of our show. I'm Joe Unger.
I'm Trisha Williams.
I'm Sergei Gepshtein.
And we just got done listening to our interview with Baba Brinkman, which led us to a conversation before we started recording on montage and how that kind of, like, we all love montages in pop culture, right?
Yeah, montage. Usually, when we talk about montage, we think of cinema first. That's where the idea was apparently invented. I believe montage is the term used in French cinema for what we call cutting in English-speaking world.
Right.
Cuts in the sense of connecting different shots.
Yeah, well, what montages do is it takes out all the boring stuff for us. All the stuff that doesn't really matter, they just drop out of it and then just shows us all the tiny bits of information that we need to understand but to get to the end goal. If you want to relate it to rap, a lot of the things that they do when they are putting words together for that, they're dropping out a lot of useless words. They're dropping out of a lot of useless syllables. They're cutting off ends of words. They're putting words together. They're flowing words in between to get to the message as fast as possible without all the boring stuff in between.
And you know, this connection between visual montage and Baba's art is a theme visited by theorists of montage from the very beginning. One of the first theorists of cinema, Sergei in Soviet Union, was writing about visual montage, but his starting point was actually linguistic. In one of his early articles on this, he compared the composition of Japanese ideograms, the symbols that represent ideas.
Right.
Yeah, so, yeah, exactly. Baba's domain of linguistics and our visual domain are intricately connected.
Okay, we have symbols that we know are words. Like, how does that work in the brain? That aspect of taking these words and then creating a mental image around them. Like, it's almost like the question I asked Baba: what comes first, the beat or the rhyme? Like, what comes first, the symbol or what we see?
People that really live in the music world, the audio world, do they think about the rhythm before they think about the words?
Right, where those pictures come from that
Right.
creates those stories.
And notice they also talk about spatial rhythm quite often in, say, in architecture or in painting.
Right.
They describe visual qualities of paintings by creating this atmosphere or sense of rhythm, especially in large paintings.
Right. That actually goes into game design as well. It's the cadence of game design. When you're making a painting, you want to make sure that there are spots where your eye can rest and the spots that are slightly busier and some things that only give one piece of information. It's the same with playing through a game. You want to make sure the player is running their character through a game, that this spot is exciting and this spot is a little more relaxing and this spot is, intense and building up. Pretty directly related to the way that Baba does a lot of all of this stuff. Actually, even when he was up on TED Talk and even just the way that he was speaking when he wasn't even rapping felt the same way.
There seems to be this perception around repetition and that sense of rhythm. A good speaker, a good painting, a good architectural piece, right, is perceived as at least as pleasing to humans. But is it?
Interesting. There could be sensory pleasure there and also an intellectual pleasure from comprehending this rapid stream of information in our visual analogs. So think about the manner of painting, the style, which could be pleasing in itself. But then the message of the painting, so to speak, I want to put the word message in quotation marks, is a source of separate pleasure. It's not clear what comes first, but they definitely interact in more than one way.
Such as having a very slow, beautiful rhythmic song with a message that is more in your face, a little more intense, or vice versa.
Or like watching a movie or listening to a rap song in a language you don't understand and you love it, and then you find out what the words are and you're appalled, right?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, the music of language.
Joe, your question I think was interesting is, does repetition equal quality? And I think that it often can be misinterpreted that way. When you hear a song over and over and over and over, you start assuming that the song is good. Maybe you didn't like it, but it's a good song that you just didn't like. Because you hear it a lot, you think it's popular, and popular equals the quality.
Or like it's a principle of marketing. The more you expose somebody, the more that brand gets established.
Right. The more hits you have, the more views you have, the more
brand X
downloads
is quality.
So if we bring it back to like the cadence of rap, if we use the same flow and rhythm of something that is already popular, but put different words in, do we immediately sort of assume it's good quality?
In language generally, I would say rhythm is important. A familiar rhythm is a signature of language. If you put there all the correct words and everything is right, except for the rhythm, what you're saying may not be understood.
Right.
In light of that, Trisha, when you go and make, say, a webcomic, there's a certain rhythm, and it's a montage in itself. So what's first for you? Is it the rhythm, or is it the montage? Is it that whole?
Actually, it's the rhythm. 9 out of 10 webcomics I do are 3 panels. And within those 3 panels, I have to have, the introduction, the lead up, and then the joke. And I have to organize every single image that I'm approaching, every single comic I'm approaching to that rhythm.
So the sequence of 3 elements, it's like a melody, right? It's the structure to which you
very
you
much.
have to fit your story.
Yeah, that's the melody that I have to, conduct to. I guess I'm not quite sure what the best...
The idea of Gestalt actually was first proposed in the context of melody. There was this philosopher, psychologist, von Ehrenfels, who argued that when you play the same melody in a different key, you would recognize it as the same melody, even though the elements, the individual notes would be different. He proposed to call as a Gestalt quality, later known as Gestalt, this melody which doesn't depend on the elements.
Well, and even in Art Deco, in architecture, and modernist architecture as well, it's finding the rhythm of space and object to create something that's inherently more approachable.
Yes, spatial rhythms, in visual spatial rhythms is a universal theme in multiple cultures.
So in light of all this, Sergei, are you going to listen to some more rap?
I should. I'm fascinated by the poetry of it. And Baba was speaking his TED Talk about the poetic discoveries that rap musicians made. But it made me think about montage in a more general sense. Really, our mind is a montage, auditory, visual, linguistic. We put together elements from the very beginning of cultures.
In design principles as well, you look at something like montage, that basically a montage is a way to tell a story. And if you have a rhythm plus a montage, you've got a sticky narrative. And that's inherently like a design aspect that you desire as well. That's one of the strengths of Baba's work. Poetry as something that was a utilitarian tool, not just pretty. Right? Something that a designer can go in there and go, oh, I can create a better image in your head if I make it rhyme.
I think that's one of the reasons that Baba is very good at bringing those together and make you maybe get past some of those things that, whether it was the rhythm or the rhyme that you didn't like before, and you start actually thinking about the other one.
Right, or even leading into this conversation and how we started talking about Glass's composition, right, and how his rhythm and his notes and in what we call avant-garde composers is also similar. It's kind of has that very strong rhythm, a beat that's really identifiable, bringing hip hop and science together.
And classical music.
And classical.
Right?
Avant-garde classical music.
The Rap Guide to Religion is now available for download. For more information, go to bababrinkman.com or head over to Pinball Rules Podcast for links. Pinball Rules Podcast is recorded in San Diego, California. Your host has been Joe Unger, creative commentator Trisha Williams, science commentator Sergei Gepshtein, audio direction and original music by Michael David Peter. Additional tracks by Baba Brinkman off the Rap Guide to Religion and Rap Guide to Evolution LPs. Pinball Rules Podcast is a copyright of Pigeonhole Productions 2015.